The United States and the European Union have made the transatlantic free trade deal a priority issue between them, and they hope to wrap up the bilateral pact by next year. But where really does all of this optimism come from when other trade deals like the Doha round of GATT end in failure? For an answer to that question, we welcome Mr. Matthias Petschke. He is the head of the European Commission representation in Germany. Matthias, where really do you get all of this optimism?
The bilateral trade between the EU and the US is about 1/3 of world trade. So what we are doing together is extremely relevant for world trade. If we manage between the EU and the US to agree on joint standards, this is going to be very relevant for the rest of the world. If we manage to agree on an ambitious and broad-based deal, it's going to affect the WTO indirectly, because other partners will see that we have managed to agree on important issues, and they will see in which way this was done. And we are kind of setting the agenda and also setting the standards. And that is a huge opportunity. If we look around and see what the business community wants us to do, we have obviously done a very detailed stakeholder consultation, and the result of all this is that the business community wants this deal. The business community wants us to pursue this very privileged bilateral relationship, and therefore we consider that we are doing this in the best interest of our industry and in the best interest, in a way, also of others, of the multilateral environment, where at this point in time things are not sufficiently moving. So we are moving bilaterally, and hopefully this will then create a further impetus for the multilateral environment to move ahead as well.
When do you hope to start these negotiations? What really is your timeline?
We have just adopted the draft mandate about a week ago, actually, and we hope that the Council, who is now going to deal with this draft mandate adopted by the Commission in a Commission session last week, that the mandate will be accepted by the Council, hopefully in a Council meeting taking place in mid-June. That's at least the deadline which in a way exists, and then obviously we are ready, and it should be starting very quickly. We definitely want to launch this process as quickly as possible, just to take advantage of the political momentum which exists. So you will have seen that we've prepared the draft mandate just within a month after the political announcements have been made by the three presidents, by President Obama, by President Van Rompuy, and by my president, Barroso. So it has been a very quick process, and I think the momentum is there, and we now need to make progress. But I think it will need a while, and what I've read and heard is that 2-year time span would probably be realistic.
What are some of the biggest challenges confronting the negotiators right now? There are a lot of hot-button issues, such as the genetically modified food and animal testing.
Certainly, at some point in time, we will have to face these challenges. And they have always been in a trade relationship, which is as broad as this bilateral trade relationship between the US and the EU. It's very clear, it's normal in a way, that there are problems, that there are stumbling blocks, that there are trade irritants. There have always been trade irritants. We will also have to see what we can do in terms of sorting them out, in terms of identifying regulatory answers. We definitely want to go for high standards. So it's not a question of lowering the standards. The ambition will be to try and settle for the highest possible standards in achieving common ground on regulatory issues. And that's going to be the real challenge on the various issues you've mentioned.
Some say that the transatlantic free trade deal will add about 1.5% to annual GDP growth. How do you see that in Berlin?
We see that it's possible. We have an independent study which has been provided by a London-based institute, and the figures which have been identified are impressive. They are impressive. There's going to be a boost of bilateral trade in both directions, but not only a boost of bilateral trade, but the important thing, I think, for people to realize that this is not just going to be a bilateral thing. It will increase trade at a world scale. It will lead to more trade, not just between the two blocs, but to more trade with Europe, between Europe and the rest of the world, and the US and the rest of the world. And obviously, if we manage to agree on joint standards, this will have a major impact as well, because we are, in a way, setting the agenda. We are agreeing on issues. We are deepening our bilateral trade relationship, and that obviously will have a huge impact on trade more generally. Just to give you some figures, the Institute has identified a variety of impressive figures. And if I look at the gains which are expected, there is a gain for the EU which is around 120 billion euros per year. The gains for the US are more or less the same, a bit less, I think, but still in the same order of magnitude. So that's quite impressive. And if we look at the gains which are expected at world scale, we realize that also there is an impact on global GDP, which is estimated to be around 100 billion. So it's not just beneficial for both sides of the Atlantic, it's going to be very beneficial for the whole trade community.
There is some discussion about America's strategic relationship with Asia, in talks with Asia, and whether or not the U.S. is using that deal to try to put some leverage on Europe to get a better deal here. Do you see that the same way?
It's very good that the U.S. want this deal. We also want it. But it's not that we want it because the US are putting pressure on us. I think there is a strong drive here in the business community, but also in the political establishment to go for this deal. And therefore, I don't see the US pushing for it or pushing the European side for it. I think there is a convergence of political will and a convergence of interest, which pushes us in the same direction, actually. And I think it's important to underline that this is not something which we are doing bilaterally to exclude others, or that we don't do it because it's against others. It is just joining up, joining forces, deepen our relationship, putting our very important political relationship also on a very solid and deeper economic level. And we think that such a deal could shape our economic relationship for the decades to come, and could be very beneficial for both sides.
How do you see the impact of the EU and the Asian talks on the EU and the US deal?
We've got a track record of region-to-region talks. And we've always been in close touch with the ASEAN community of states. We have, however, in the last years also worked there on a bilateral basis, and have just wrapped up a negotiation with Singapore. We are in the process of discussing, negotiating with others, with Malaysia, with Vietnam. We've just launched a discussion, a trade negotiation with Thailand. So we have a variety of partners in that region, but we remain open, obviously, also to region talks in a broader context. The fact that we are now pushing for this bilateral agreement with the US, again, is not something which is against any other trade deal. We are pursuing a variety of bilateral deals at the same time, but obviously the trade agreement with the US has a particular importance given the existing trade relationship, the importance both partners have for each other, and therefore it has kind of a geopolitical relevance many other deals do not have at this stage.
Mr. Matthias Petschke, we thank you very much for joining in See It Knowledge.
Pleasure.